It's time for the Saturday morning cup of coffee with Paul the Waterman. Now, here's Paul.
Good morning. Welcome. Saturday morning coffee with Paul the Waterman on Northern Colorado's Voice, 1310 KFKA, FM 103.1. So, I did some digging, and I got some important information I'm going to share with you. And it was alarming at best. And so I mentioned several times the EPA's unregulated contamination list. It's something I've been searching for. What is it? Where is it at? So I decided I was going to go ahead and use AI. And so I typed in AI, and I said, hey, give me the EPA unregulated contamination in my drinking water. And boy, did I get a wealth of information. And you guys can do the exact same thing I've done. And you'll see for yourself. And it comes directly from the EPA's website. And so one of the things that I'm going to jump into that's shocking, it's truthful, and I think you'll find after today will answer a lot of questions, but it'll also be extremely concerning to everybody out there. One, I want to share with you. Greeley, your next door neighbor, Fort Collins, participates in testing for the EPA's unregulated contamination list. So Fort Collins, there's a laundry list of pharmaceuticals, of industrial chemicals, antibiotics that we're going to cover today. And so in Fort Collins, they test for those items and then report back to the EPA. But they don't tell us. And so that's something that I are going to reach out and see if I can't get Fort Collins to talk to me about that so I can share it with you. So under the EPA's list, did you guys realize there's viruses in our drinking water? The antivirus is in our drinking water. So let me share this with you. Remember when did you ever wonder when they can forecast how a virus, how bad the flu season is going to be, the type of virus that's in the flu season, and and what area of the country is going to be affected most? Have you ever wondered that? Well, you know how they do that? Because they test it. It's in our drinking water. It's absolutely so. Remember when we had COVID and everybody wore a mask and it was just spooky how COVID could spread? You thought it was like this invisible monster that was coming out to get you. We didn't get it through the air. We got COVID from their drinking water. And one of the contaminants that's an unregulated contaminant that we're going to cover is the adenovirus. And it creates a respiratory illness. Also can give you a gastrointestinal illness. But that's absolutely how we get sick. Viruses are spread through the drinking water. So here's the thing that's scary. Think about this. Do you remember back, I'm using COVID as an example because we all lived through it. Remember when they would test for COVID in the waste treatment plant? So that means that they go to a waste treatment plant and you would test positive for COVID. So they could tell you what area in the community had a COVID outbreak, that was worse than others. And so you cannot test a dead virus. You can't test for a dead virus. So if you're testing water and you get a positive, that means that virus is alive. So what does this mean? It means that chlorination, the chloramine, is not killing the virus. Viruses evolve. Viruses want to live. They want to spread. So I think it's easy, common sense, to assume and think that viruses mutate to become chlorine resistant. So then it's up to our body to fight off a virus because there's really not one antibiotic that you can give or you can take that's going to kill a virus. Now, they have medications specifically designed to fight viruses, you bet, but it's your own body's immunity. So if you have a weakened immune system, the virus is going to get you. So what happens if we have cancer, for example, and we've all known somebody or have a family member that had cancer, body was fighting cancer, and it wasn't the cancer that killed them, it was the ammonia virus that did them in because their body was so weak they couldn't fight it off. And what if the viruses that we get, because of the evolution and how viruses evolve, they're surviving in our water system? And that's exactly what's happening. I have a list right here, and I'm going to go through more, of all the viruses that are in our drinking water. That one of them is called the calciovirus. It's part of the norovirus, which includes the norovirus, and it's also a mild self-limiting gastrointestinal illness, so the stomach flu, the stomach bug. How many people get the stomach flu, and you think it's because it's something you ate? It's not. It's because of something you drink. So one of the things that we all need to consider is this. Water filtration now is a necessity more than ever. And water filtration has to include a water softener to remove the hardness, because hard water will affect the reverse osmosis. And I'm going to start recommending to everybody whole house ultraviolet light filtration so you can zap the virus. A UV light is measured in joule ratings, and you get a UV light that's strong enough that it zaps it. And what it does, it sterilizes it so that virus will not multiply, will not survive. Another thing, let me just do this on this page. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, hang on, 9, 10, 11, 12 viruses that the EPA knows it's out there. They know that's in their water supply, but they're unregulated. There is also bacteria. There's, and forgive me for not pronouncing this properly, but this is, I'm going to spell this out. It's ESCHERICHIA coli. It's a bacterium. It's in the water supply, and it can create gastrointestinal illness and kidney failure. So if that's a bacteria, okay, that also means that it's become chlorine resistant. And if it's become chlorine resistant, you're also going to learn today how many antibiotics are in our water supply. This is, again, they're in our water, but they're all unregulated contaminants because they don't want us to know that they're there, which makes no sense to me. Another bacteria that's in our water is Legionella pneumonia. It's a bacteria that creates, causes lung disease when inhaled. So you can basically inhale that when you're taking a shower. It's in the steam. Mycobacterium abscessus. I'll spell this one for you. MYCOBACTERIUM. It can create lung infections, and those with underlying lung disease, such as cystic fibrosis, may cause skin and soft tissue infection. So with these contaminants in your water supply, you remove them or basically get rid of them with ultraviolet light whole house filtration. Now, reverse osmosis can trap the bacteria and the virus, but it won't kill them. And eventually what can happen is that they will overrun that RO system by itself, and then they'll pass on through. Something else, unregulated contaminants in the U.S. drinking water, public health, it's something that we should be informed when you're talking about, being aware of what public health challenges are. The United Nations recognizes that access to water and sanitation is a fundamental human right. And I'm not a big fan of the United Nations, so I just want to share that with you. But the principle regarding human rights and clean water it's reflected in the United States, where states such as California and Virginia have enacted laws affirming the human right to water, and while other states support environmental rights through constitutional green new laws for conservation, and it doesn't, however, count the ability of clean drinking water is increasingly concerned for the public water systems. So basically what that means is that if we have a limitation, and if we don't know everything that's in our water supply, then we as a public, need to be aware of that so we know that we can treat it, because your public water system, here's the other thing, your public water system is not designed to remove bacteria or viruses from our water supply. And then what happens is, follow me on this, when you take wastewater and you separate the water from the sludge, and the sludge is the biosolids, which is human waste, and you separate those two, the human waste then is given away, and it's used as fertilizer. So whatever contaminant is in that human waste is then going to contaminate the plants and vegetation that it's used to fertilize. And then eventually it's going to contaminate the livestock that the, vegetation, is grown for. So if I'm a farmer and I'm growing, alfalfa hay, if I'm growing alfalfa and hay, and then it's contaminated, what's happening? I'm giving those cows the contamination, and then eventually I'm going to, eat that contamination when it goes through the food chain, from the milk that we drink to the steak that we eat to the pork chops to the chicken. So that's something that, we need to, consider. So let's take our first time out. Sorry about that. I forgot to silence my phone. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So, what's really in your drinking water? Understanding modern water contaminants. Clear water doesn't always mean clean water. Many of today's most concerning contaminants are invisible, odorless, and tasteless. Yet, they are increasingly found in public and private water supplies across the U.S. Here are some of the most common contaminants being detected today. Well, number one is the PFAS forever chemicals. Pure and polyfluoroalkyl substances are man-made chemicals used in nonstick cookware, firefighting foam, food packaging, and stain-resistant materials. Why do they matter? Because it's persistent. They do not break down. They don't go away. That's why they call them forever. And then they build up in the environment. It's called bioaccumulate. So this contaminant is everywhere. It's in the plants. It's in the water. It's in the meat. So these contaminants can accumulate in the body over time. They link to immune system disruptors and hormone interference. And, they're basically found in every single municipal water system. These forever chemicals, everybody has a forever chemical contaminant in their body. Microplastics. Microplastics, did you realize microplastics is an unregulated contaminant? I don't know why that is, but that's microplastics. An unregulated contaminant. Microplastics are tiny plastic particles released from packaging, synthetic clothing fibers, and industrial waste. Why do they matter? They're small enough to pass through many treatment systems. Many carry chemical additives and bacteria. That's the most important to realize. Microplastics are just like turbidia. Turbidia is floaty dirt. The EPA states that if you have turbidia in your water, that the maximum contamination level or minimum contamination level for turbidia is 0. Why? Because they carry carcinogens. They can carry viruses, carry bacteria into your water supply. It's the same thing with microplastics. So, long-term health effects of microplastics are still being studied, but I'll tell you this. We know that microplastics are in the human brain. We know that microplastics are in the male and female reproductive organs. We know that they're in the arteries of our heart. And so microplastics in people that have stents, you can have a stent, for blood vessels in your legs and your chest and heart arteries. Microplastic contamination can affect those as well. As something to consider and think about. Prescription drugs and hormones, what we're going to also cover today. Trace amounts of medication, such as pain relievers, antibiotics, antidepressants, and hormones have been detected in drinking water. How'd they get there? Medication passed right through the human body. That's how it happens. So when you take a medication, it becomes a metabolite. And when your body gets rid of it, that metabolite then is easily ingested by somebody else. And so this is something that, think about. It's kind of gross, but it's the truth. Anytime you take a medication, you take a, blood thinner, warfarin, any medication that you take, when you use the restroom and you flush that toilet, that medication is expelled from your body and it goes into the waste treatment plant. From the waste treatment plant, that water that they process goes back right into the water resource that other communities draw from. And eventually, we mentioned this before in the show, people are going to be in what we call reusable water stage. So that means it's going to go right from the toilet to the tap. With the growth that we have here in northern Colorado, eventually you guys are going to be reusable water from the toilet to the tap. And you also are probably already in reusable water, as I mentioned before, because if one community dumps it into a reservoir down, it's the same, another community draws it out from the same reservoir. Pharmaceuticals can also come from improper disposal of unused drugs. So, flush them down the toilet or dump them in the landfill. Conventional water treatment plants are not designed and they do not remove pharmaceuticals from the water. So, when you have a continuous exposure to medication, hormones, for example, antibiotics, for example, think about what problems are already occurring when we get bacteria that's becoming antibiotic resistant. Think about what's happening when we have hormones in the water. And I mentioned this the other day. Do you guys realize that young children, especially girls, are reaching puberty at a young age? I mean, 9 to 10 years old. Young girls are hitting puberty at 9 to 10 years old when it really should be, 13 to 15? Why is that? And that's a concern. Pharmaceutical contamination is, I think, becoming the biggest issue for us because they're not telling us how much pharmaceuticals are in the water supply. If we're not aware, then we can't make that educational choice on our own that, hey, we need to, remove this and treat our water. And the way to remove pharmaceuticals from your water supply is through reverse osmosis. I think if you take a look at how society has evolved and how the use for water in municipalities has increased, everything is water demand. Car washes, for example. Car washes, they encourage them to reclaim the water, meaning reuse the water in the car wash. That's encouraged. Municipalities want water. Look at these, communities. We're really a desert. Think about this. Think about the water resources that we have in Colorado. And when we go through a drought, then, this spring, we're not going to have the snow runoff like we used to. So that's also is, used to help, fill up certain aquifers in certain areas. But I think water tables are going to definitely, decrease, and that's going to be an issue. And that's all going to affect the overall water quality. But then that's also can enhance the pharmaceutical contamination and other chemical contamination that's in our water already. Okay. Something I want you guys to look up. It's called a contaminant emerging concern. It's the EPA's model method 1694 and 1698. Method 1694, there's 74 pharmaceuticals and personal care products in water, soil, sediment, and biosolids. So the EPA model 1694 is monitoring 74 pharmaceuticals and personal care products in water, soil, sediment, and biosolids. So what's that mean? We know what biosolids are. We just discussed it. So that's the pharmaceuticals that are in the waste. The waste is separated from the water. So we got the water and soil and biosolids. So the pharmaceuticals will stay in the water. Pharmaceuticals will also be in the biosolids. And so when they get rid of biosolids and they send that off, and they're testing this. Now here's the key. Let's pick on Fort Collins because I learned that Fort Collins is participating in these programs with the EPA. If they take the biosolids and they test for it and they report it to the EPA and they know it's there, do they still give away those biosolids? Absolutely. We know it's true. And we know in some cases, think about all the other municipalities that don't participate with the EPA in testing. And so, you've got forever chemicals are in biosolids, and now we have pharmaceuticals. One of the main pharmaceutical contaminants is acetaminophen. Then we have ampicillin. Ampicillin is a common antibiotic. We have azithromycin. I'm not pronouncing that properly. Azithromycin antibiotic in a water supply. Of course, there's caffeine. And I'm surprised that they're monitoring caffeine, to be honest with you, but and why caffeine would have to be an unregulated contaminant. Carbamazepine is also an antibiotic, anticonvulsant. Tetracycline is they found in our water supply. And then albuterol is an anti-asthmatic medication. Clarithromycin is an antibiotic that's in our water supply. So codeine is an opiate. That's in our water supply. So I think it's safe to say not only codeine, but we have cocaine, we have heroin. I mentioned to you before about the story we had about that community during the Labor Day weekend in Maine that they tested positive for cocaine use. Okay, we're up at our next break. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman, and we'll catch you on the other side. Welcome back. Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman on Northern Colorado's Voice, AM 1310 KFKA. So I'm going over a laundry list of contaminants that I found. I found the unregulated contamination list from the EPA. So these are pharmaceutical medications that are in the water supply. I'm doing my very best to pronounce them properly, but I want to share some of them with you. Because I think it's important to understand that every glass of water we take, and you don't have a water filtration system, meaning, reverse osmosis, I'm going to recommend everybody, get a ultraviolet light because there's also viruses and bacteria in the water. So, these are things that I really feel, we need to know, and this is the regulated contamination, and long story short, this means is these are the contaminants that the EPA knows that's in our water supply, but they don't want to tell us. That's what this really boils down to. Okay, so we have digoxin is another contaminant. It's a cardiac a medication. We also have another asthmatic medication. It's a metabolite. It's called dimethyloxane. We have tetracycline. It's an antibiotic that's in a water supply. With all these antibiotics that I'm looking at and I'm seeing, because I'm reading this to you guys, in real time, it's a wonder. It's just a wonder how we have, any kind of medicine that can fight bacteria. Because we're all over antibiotic, we're over by antibiotic, I can't talk, already medication because, some of these bacterium are evolving as well as viruses. But, when you get an antibiotic and you're taking that medication, nobody, I think, has really realized that, we're basically passing this through. This is getting into the environment. And when you get a bacteria that becomes antibiotic resistant, it's because it's evolving because of where it's at. These antibiotics, guys, think about this. It's all over in the environment. And bacteria is all over in their environment. So if bacteria, as it's there, is exposed to all these antibiotics, what's going to happen? They're going to evolve and become resistant to these antibiotics, just like there's a fungus. I think I mentioned this last week. There's a fungus that's spreading in the hospital. Well, the story that's spreading in the South and I think Tennessee, where this fungus is antibiotic resistant and it's getting in and affecting lungs, respiratory, and it's causing, causing death. Ibuprofen is in the water. Metformin, which is a diabetic medication, that's in your water. Moxicillin is in the water. I have 7 penicillins in the water supply, 7 antibiotics that are in our water supply, and oxacillin is in the water. There's 2 different types of penicillin, penicillin G and penicillin V. They say that's in the water supply. Erythromycin is in the water supply. Several antacid medications It's in the water supply. So I say this, and I don't want to bore you with, reading every single one of these off, but it's just amazes to me. So hang on one second. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, plus 7. So there's 22 so far, antibiotics that's basically in our drinking water. So this is concerning, and I think we all should, definitely be concerned about this. And if we really knew, let me ask you this question. If you knew that you were drinking water full of medication, what would your first thought be? If you knew that the waste treatment plant and the water treatment plant were not designed to remove these medications from the water that you pay for, what would you think? So basically, what this means is that I knew pharmaceuticals were in the water supply. I didn't know to what degree, and I'm seeing all these antibiotic, in the water supply, acid reflux medication, blood thinner medication, anticoagulant, a medication which is warfarin, and warfarin really technically is poison in a water supply. What would you think? We would think that, okay, well, I want to remove it, so let's get a point of use reverse osmosis to remove it. Let's get a whole house ultraviolet light to zap the viruses and bacteria, because it doesn't end there. I'm on the next page, and the next page is all hormones. I'm counting real time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 hormones on one page. So we probably got 20 known hormones in a water supply. 5 of them are sex hormones. Estradiol 2, estrola, estrogen, progesterone is in there. We have ovulation inhibitors that are in the water supply. And then we have hormone metabolites in our water supply. And we have hormone replacement. I'm not going to pronounce this properly, forgive me. Equilin is a hormone replacement. So that means that if somebody is having problems conceiving, is it because of the water they're drinking? If somebody has hormones that are unbalanced, is that because the water that they're drinking? And this is something, again, I think everybody has a right to know that these hormones in your water supply. I think we have a right to know, especially when we have a community that wants to augment their bodies. And when they augment their bodies, what does that mean? That means that you're sharing that medication with basically the whole world. And why do I say that? Because water isn't just exclusive to our area. Water evaporates, water goes into the rain clouds, so moisture is spread globally. When you get a contaminant, and they call it a bioaccumulation contaminant, like forever chemicals, what this means is that it's spread throughout the world because, the hydrological cycle, when moisture evaporates into the air, so whatever moisture that we have, in the Great Lakes, as it evaporates, in the wintertime you have lake effect snow, so it's given right back to, to the Great Lake states. But these contaminants are also in the ocean. And so, so when you get moisture that's is sucked in, to the atmosphere from the ocean, that's spread globally. And you have a lot of countries, and here in the United States, we're one of them, that dump wastewater into the ocean. Cruise ships had the norovirus. You remember listening to the news where a cruise ship, that everybody that took a cruise, the whole passenger list was affected by norovirus? Well, that's because their water supply in the cruise ship probably isn't monitored and sanitized properly, but that's how they got it, from drinking the water. When we have this many hormones, antibiotic medication, it's in a water supply, it's a global issue because water is spread globally. So think about the United States compared to other nations have some of the most stringent rules when it comes to, the sanitation process. Other countries don't. Other countries aren't as stringent when it comes to what, and how we process water. I think that's the best way to explain it. That's how it spread globally. That's how the forever chemical problem, it spread globally. So this is something that, when Fort Collins is part of this process, this program to test for these contaminants and report back to the EPA, I'll share something with you real quick. Think about this, and 1,4-dioxane. I mentioned 1,4-dioxane. 1,4-dioxane is on the EPA's unregulated contamination list, but it's an industrial stabilizer that's been used in manufacturing practices since the late 1800s. There's been over 200 years of contamination from 1,4-dioxane, and yet it's still unregulated. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman on 1310 KFKA. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman. Thank you for being with me. So today's show, kind of a recap, is I found the EPA's unregulated contamination list. I found the EPA's secrets that is in our water supply. And it's not really a secret because, I found it on their website. So what I did is I used AI. I said, hey, I typed in, show me the list of unregulated contaminants that's in the EPA's unregulated contamination list. And so they were able to find this information on the EPA's website. So you can find this information for yourself. It's right there. I encourage you to do the same thing I did. And when you look at all this information and you print it out, you're going to have a book. It's a big book of information to have. And I'm only touching the surface, and next week we'll cover more. But on the EPA, the heading of the EPA's website, I have something that says types of drinking water contaminants. The Safe Drinking Water Act defines the term contaminant as meaning a physical, chemical, biological, or radiological substance or matter in water. Therefore, the law defines contaminant very broadly as being anything other than water molecules. Drinking water may reasonably be expected to contain at least small amounts of some contaminants. Some drinking water contaminants may be harmful if consumed at certain levels in drinking water, at certain levels in drinking water, while others may be harmless. The presence of contaminants does not necessarily indicate that the water poses a health risk. Only a small number of contaminants, as defined above, are listed on the contaminant candidates list. So this is called the Contaminant Candidates List, CCL. So the EPA's unregulated contamination list is a contaminant candidate list. So one of the questions I have is, why is 1,4-dioxane still on the contaminant candidate list when we know that it's very bad for us? The Contaminant Candidate List, or CCL, serves as a first level of evaluation for unregulated drinking water contaminants that may need further investigation of potential health risk in the levels at which they are found in drinking water. The following are general categories of drinking water contaminants. And first one, physical contaminant. Does the contaminant permanently impact the physical appearance and other physical properties of water? Examples of physical contamination are sediment, organic material suspended in the water, lakes, rivers, streams from soil erosion. That would be your turbidity that we talk about. Then we have chemical contaminants. Chemical contaminants are other elements or compounds that may be naturally occurring or man-made. Examples of chemical contamination include nitrogen, bleach, salts, pesticides, metals, toxins produced by bacteria, and human or animal drugs. Biological contaminants. Contaminants or organisms in water that also refer to microbes or microbiological contaminants. Examples of biological or microbiological contaminants include bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and parasites. So we know that we have bacteria and viruses in the water. Radiological contaminants are chemical elements with unbalanced number of protons and neutrons, resulting in unstable atoms that can emit ionizing radiation. example of this contaminant is plutonium and uranium. Well, in Colorado, we have natural uranium in our water supply, don't we? I don't know what my thoughts are, to be honest with you, about all this. I knew it was there. Common sense told me that all this contamination was here. I'm going to share more as I dive into this. So I apologize if I seem kind of unorganized. It's just overwhelming. You know, another contaminant, what's overwhelming is the amount of bacteria that medication don't go away. Medication stays in the water supply. Here's the thing that's alarming. Forever chemicals, remember, they started out, forever chemicals, the 1 part per billion. And we listened to an audio clip I played a couple weeks ago where 1 part per billion basically is 1 drop of the forever chemical in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Then they reduced it down to 4 part per trillion. And 4 part per trillion got reduced down to 0. So it does not take a large number to be a contaminant. I've always said that. I recommend everybody out there chew the bubblegum on this. Think about a water filtration system for your home that's as important than having a furnace in the wintertime. A hot water heater. Everybody, doesn't want to take a cold shower. But with what we're finding and what I've shared with you today and what I'm going to be sharing with you next week and probably the week after that is, I'm going to look into these antibiotics. I'm going to look into these hormones. I'm going to find out exactly what these hormones do and how they can affect us. And I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to share this because I wonder how many illnesses out there, how many cancers out there are caused because of the water that we're drinking. And when they have a list of contamination and they're not letting us know, to me, that's a problem. And are they doing that because they don't want to create some sort of public outcry or alarm? And, and what they don't want to tell you is that your local municipality cannot remove these from your water. And so when you turn the water on and it's clear and it smells, sometimes you smell bleach, but it just looks, it's clear glass water, you're automatically assuming and thinking, well, that has to be healthy. And that's just not the case. There's hidden contaminants in the water supply. So every glass of water you have is not 100% H2O. And every glass of water you're looking at could have viruses, hormones, and antibiotics that you're drinking. So with the point of use reverse osmosis, that will eliminate the pharmaceuticals, will reduce the pharmaceuticals. That will also help trap the viruses and bacteria. But then we would need a whole house ultraviolet light. So the ideal filtration system would be, the point of use water softener would be the, point of entry water softener, point of use reverse osmosis, and whole house ultraviolet light filtration. I want to share something else with you. Another contaminant that we have that can affect northern Colorado is lithium. Lithium is natural in water. Northern Colorado, especially, eastern parts of northern Colorado, have naturally high sodium levels. And what if those high sodium levels that we have is contain lithium? Lithium is a natural occurring element, and it may be found in high concentrations in certain parts of the country, particularly in groundwater sources in western United States, where geological formations contain lithium salts. Lithium in various formations has numerous commercial uses. It's included in pharmaceutical drugs and industrial chemical catalysts. It's a sanitizing agent for swimming pools and hot tubs. Lithium is likely present in a variety of foods, such as grains, cereal grains, and leafy vegetables, and the roots of crops. But it's not clear which foods may be a significant source of dietary lithium. But lithium is also, too much lithium is harmful for us. But lithium is in the water supply, and lithium is listed as an unregulated contaminant. So we're going to do more research there. Screening levels and reporting limits for drinking water. The EPA has not established a non-regulatory drinking water health advisory or any regulatory standard for lithium in public drinking water supplies. The EPA calculates a provision for oil references, doses, and yet to be determined, basically. So it's part of the contaminant list fifth generation. So real quick, there's been a total of 5 in the modern day, in the last, let's say, 30 years, of this candidate contamination list. And we're on the 5th generation. And this is, you can do your own research. You can go to EPA.gov. You could do exactly what I've done, is type in on your AI of choice and say, give me the laundry list of EPA unregulated contamination. And you'll find the same information that I have. And print it out and read it. Be informed. You know, with prescription drugs and hormones that are in our water, we need to know exactly what the long-term effects are going to be. So, sadly, we're out of time. Thank you for being with me. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman, 1310 KFKA. Everybody, be blessed. Think about your water. Do your own research. And I'll see you next week.